Word. Okay. Okay, Erev Tov. First, I want to thank everyone who responded to my informal little survey about continuing on the topic of Chassidut more than just for today. Overwhelming majority was to continue, or you didn't care one way or the other. So we're going to continue. I'm probably going to guess 3 more classes. Even I could probably do 50 more, probably about 3 more, 2 or 3. And then we're going to kind of go backwards and go back into the Mitnagdim, their rabbinic community, their lives. We've only really met one so far. That's, of course, the Vilna Gaon and his life and his objections to Chassidut. But I'm going to focus on tonight, probably is going to be the only topic tonight, is Chassidut Chabad. As soon as you say those words, for most people, 2 things pop into their head. Number 1, the book of Tanya, which is the magnum opus of the Alter Rebbe, which we're going to get to. And the other is the modern day question of the whole issue of the Rebbe being alive and Mashiachistim. So I'm going to try to deal with both of those things tonight, because we can't look at specifically Chassidut Chabad only in the past. It's something we also have to look at the present. There might be a little bit of other Chassidut will be like that, but this is the one that really spans so many, not just generations, but also is so relevant around the world. And I don't want to get ahead of myself. Well, we're going to come to that. Remember the Maggid and Mezerich, the Talmid Muvhak, the main student of the Baal Shem Tov. He had multiple students, either first tier or second tier down, generationally, one of which I mentioned last week, in passing, was of Shneur Zalman of Liadi. Shneur Zalman of Liadi is born in 1745. I repeat, it's really important to keep this in mind. This is all during the tumultuous time of various revolutions going on in world history, not in just in Judaism. So he's born in 1745 in Liadi. He's in White Russia, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a kind of a background about who he was. Now, you'll know that among the Chabad Hasidim, that there's certain names that repeat themselves thousands of times. If you go to a Chabad shul, you can just yell Shneur Zalman or Menachem Mendel, and you're going to get a lot of people's heads turning, because it's like, I used to like in school, we're sitting in the teacher's room. There's like, 30, 40 people there, and a kid pokes his head, Amore, teacher. And like everyone turns, like kind of ridiculous. In any case, so he was Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi was lived at a time and also was born into a place and family that had the confluence of many things that really worked in his favor. A familial legacy, that he already came from a very heavily Torah-based family, very educated family. He was a time period of the early days, of course, as we know, of Chassidut, and this spiritual search that's starting to surge in the community he's in. In addition to that, a life that was filled, in modern terms, we might say he was, what's the word? I forgot the word that's used, but whatever. Like, he was very, let's say, very rigorous and very religiously passionate. He founded the Chabad movement. He is the author of Tanya, but we have to understand a little bit about who he was. He got married at a very young age. Today, it'd be illegal. At the age of 15, he married a woman named Sterna Siegel. It's also a common name, you'll find out, who was the daughter of a very wealthy man from Vitebsk. And Vitebsk also was a source of many Gedolim in the world of Chassidut. And because he got married at such a young age, and he also was married into a very wealthy family, it afforded him the opportunity to sit and learn a tremendous amount. Now, when I say that, your instinct automatically, of course, is sitting learning Torah 20, as many hours a day. It's Torah. But the truth is that he was also a Bucky. He was very well versed in math, specifically geometry and astronomy. He said either he said it or was said about him, and then it definitely said about a future Gedolei Israel, that to really understand Torah, you have to know math, you have to know science, you have to know astronomy. Like I said, I've mentioned in various classes, just going through the Rambam. If you ever learn Hilchot Kiddush HaChodesh, and I have, it's like you're clueless without really a very good knowledge of astronomy. I just did the best I could. I love astronomy, but it's not my forte. In any case, he had the opportunity to do this. He also had there were a couple of brothers of refuge, two brothers who were refugees from Bohemia. We befriended, and besides mastering, and they evidently were very knowledgeable. So besides mastering all the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch and the Torah and the Rambam and everything that came before him, he also became, like I say, very knowledgeable in the philosophy and Kabbalah and sciences. He learned a lot of Lurianic Kabbalah. Remember, it was like Luria. He became in 1764. He becomes an official disciple of the Rav Dov Ber of Mezerich, the Maggid of Mezerich, whom we spoke about last week. At the ripe old age of 22 years old, he is appointed Rav of a city called Liozna. And he holds that position for many, many, many years, for 30, let me think, 34, 35 years. He holds that position, which a rabbi who holds a position that long is that's pretty amazing. He also maintained a constant correspondence with many other Hasidic figures. We don't see yet what he's done. We're going to come to that. Don't worry. I'm just kind of just giving you a thumbnail of his life. He tried to take some level of Kabbalistic thought and Hasidic thought and put it into a context where people could understand it and to inculcate it themselves. His seminal work was Tanya. Years ago, I would never have thought of opening Tanya. To me, Tanya was a Chabad book, and unless you're a Chabad Chassid, what do you need to take your time to learn Tanya? And I guess a few years back, how many years ago? It's been maybe 5 years. It was probably during Corona, actually, so maybe less. I decided to start learning Tanya. I got myself a copy of the Rav Steinsaltz's book with his commentary on Tanya. He was a very good chassid. And then I started learning it online, and then eventually I taught up until chapter 20. Then we decided to segue into something else. Maybe one day we'll get back to Tanya. But it is a book that I don't care what branch of Judaism you practice. I'm not talking about conservative reform. We're talking about within the Orthodox world. Conservative reform too, b'simcha, come and learn Tanya. But I don't care what form of Judaism you're practicing, Tanya is an unbelievable text to learn, even if all you get is a surface level of understanding, because it's one of those books, Sfarim, that are you read, and there's the basic understanding, and there's the omek, there's the depth to it. But I get ahead of myself because I get like worked up about certain things. In any case, his whole concept of moach sholet al halev, that there's a common question: does the heart rule the mind, or does the mind rule the heart? He was very much into that the brain ruled over the heart. He also talks about the heart, the seat of the emotions, and the seat of where the Yetzer Hara is, and all these kind of things. He chose the name of this Chassidut as Chabad because it stands for Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at, the three building blocks of Tanya and three building blocks of Chabad Chassidut. Chokhmah, wisdom; Bina, understanding; and Da'at is knowledge. And again, I would highly encourage, if you've never learned Tanya, go online and find shiurim. You could always go back and see my shiurim, of course, on YouTube. Find a Chabad Chassid to learn from online. There's many of them. There's one guy from England, I think it was. It was just nice to listen to his British English explaining Tanya. I thought it was really, really nice. And he's dafka speaking to a non-religious audience, so it's making it even clearer what he's trying to explain. According to Reb Shner Zalman of Liadi, a person, a Jew, is neither static nor passive. He's a dynamic being, always needing to improve himself, always needing to try to draw out more potential. So why did he write this book? What makes it so special? Imagine for a moment, you don't have to imagine, it's really what happened with him, but imagine for a moment you're the rabbi of a community and you have 150 people in your community. And people come to you, they have needs, they have questions, they have problems, they have emotional issues, financial issues, mental health issues. Okay, so you have 150 people. Okay, maybe that's doable. Maybe you have a couple hundred people. After a certain point, let's look at modern terms. Many shuls, we get to be many, let's say a few hundred families in a shul. Very often a shul has a rabbi, they have an assistant rabbi, maybe a couple of assistants, and it's a process that kind of like almost like a corporate structure that is a requirement, because there's no way that one single person is able to handle 5, 6, 700 families completely by himself. If you want to do the job right, it's just not possible. So what happened was he becomes extremely popular. He becomes extremely popular because he's preaching a different. Remember, Chassidut is a general term. He's preaching a very specific new approach. And this is this Chabad, Chokhmah, Binah, Da'at, the constant renewal of a person needing to change and to grow and to incorporate Kabbalistic thought and to incorporate halacha and to incorporate philosophy. He decides that it's just getting too much. There's just too many people coming to him. So he decides to write a book that will incorporate his philosophy of what it means to be a Jew, how to serve Hashem, how to be a good person, how simcha, or joy, plays an extremely important role in Chabad Chassidut. And he says that because I can't see everybody, you're going to have to learn the book and understand what answers you would be given from me by reading my book. And he calls the people he's referring to who will start to follow his leadership and his teachings, B'nai Anash. Aleph, Nun, Shubchik, Shin. Anash stands for Anshe Shlomenu, like our people. There's a Yiddish expression, I don't use Yiddish much at all because I don't like it, but Unzera. Unzera, our people. Even though eventually it spreads way beyond Chabad, he said you basically need to find somebody who has been close enough to me, or someone who's learned from someone who's close enough to me to understand my philosophy, who will then be able to help teach you this book and explain to you. And it says, if you had what's called in Hasidic world, Yechidus. What's Yechidus? Yechidus means private time with the Rebbe. Let's say you wanted to go to see the Zidichover Rebbe that happens to be a Rav in Chicago. He was my Rebbe in 9th grade. Passed away just as first yahrzeit. But it's a Zidichov dynasty. So you want to go see the Zidichover Rebbe, you want to see that and meet with him by yourself completely. And you want to pour out your heart. You want to get halachic direction. That's called Yechidus. Probably also called Yechidut. But it's almost always pronounced with Ashkenazis. It's Yechidus, that you had private time with the Rebbe. So he says in the book, in the introduction, that pretty much, and I'm paraphrasing, that learning this book is as if you're having Yechidus with me, because you're getting my philosophy. Now, to open it up and just to read it, I can't say it's without value, but just to read it straight through is, you'll be reading it and maybe you pick something up here and there, but it's not the same thing as someone teaching it to you or reading with a commentary in Hebrew or in English, whatever is better for you, and I'm getting a deeper understanding. I'm not going to give a class on it in Tanya. Again, you could do that online. Basically, the whole book is based on one pasuk, Ki karov elecha davar beficha b'lvavcha, ki karov elecha me'od, Ki karov elecha davar beficha b'lvavcha la'asot. I skipped the word me'od. Ki karov me'od, because it's very easy for you to be able to deal with your thought, speech, and action. And what does it mean? How do you say it's easy to change that? Not just easy, it's exceedingly easy. His entire sefer is based on that one pasuk. And again, I become I was a very big fan. I'm actually learning. Tanya, by the way, is only a part. What we call Tanya, it's actually many is the Kutei Amarim Tanya, but there's many volumes, many sections to the book. I happen to be learning one now called Igeret HaKodesh, which literally means the holy letter, the letter of holiness. Even though there's Igrot, there's many letters. I'm on Vav. And again, I'm learning online. I'm using Rav Steinsaltz's pointing, like you can see on my bookshelf. I'm using Rav Steinsaltz's commentary, but it's very good. I'll tell you one brief story about how much mind power he put into this particular volume. And for those of you who learned Tanya or heard this story before by learning with me, you'll just have to hear it again. One day he was sitting while he was still writing the volume, writing Tanya, and he was sitting and just thinking and thinking and thinking. And I believe it was his son-in-law that came in and asked him, what he's doing. So he said that he was considering adding the letter Vav, the word and, to a specific sentence. And he's been working for 6 weeks to determine if he should put the Vav there. Why? Because what does the word and mean? It says it's taking what you had before and it's adding it to this. And I'm trying to determine, I have to go through every single step of every single thing I've written to see if it really is and this. It took him 6 weeks to determine whether he should write the Vav or not. That's the kind of mind we're talking about. He passed away in 1812, as in the War of 1812. He passed away in 1812. He's buried in Liadi, and his yard site's on the 27th of Kislev during Hanukkah. The echo of he's known as the Alter Rebbe, meaning the old Rav, the Baal HaTanya. He's known by many different titles. Now, there's one thing about, if you know anything about Chabad, in addition to Tanya, you also know about something called Yud Tes or Yud Tet Kislev, or it's also known as Yat Kislev, the 19th of Kislev, the Chag HaGeula. It is the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidut. What am I talking about? I'll explain. In 1798, not unlike other great figures of Jewish history and rabbis in Jewish history, he was thrown in prison. We'll see why soon. He was thrown in prison, and he is released on the 19th of Kislev. That date in the world of Chabad, literally around the world, is celebrated as a holiday. Not just because the Rebbe got out, and we'll see why. Yud Tet Kislev is your holiday. Oh, it's your birthday. Very nice. It's a good, auspicious day. So it's not just because you got out of prison. We'll see in a minute why that's so important. But it's known as the Rosh Hashanah Chassidut. It's known as the Chag HaGeula. Geula means the redemption. It has a few different names. But as the founder of Chassidut Chabad, and the author of Tanya, which becomes very important also, we'll see, it became a major vector, a turning point in the world of Chassidut, and especially in the world of Chabad Chassidut, both in terms of history, politics, halacha, spiritual significance. So let's talk a little bit about how did he end up in jail? If God forbid I was put in jail for something, I did something bad, and if it was legit and I deserve jail, I guess that outside my immediate family, my getting out of jail wouldn't be the cause for a worldwide celebration or a holiday. By the way, on Yud Tet Kislev, not only the Chabad Hasidim celebrate it, it's a chag. It's literally like I say, a yontif. They get dressed up in their Shabbat clothing. They have all kinds of events they do. Here in modern times, we know that at the here in Israel at Binyanei Ha'umah, there's this conference every year. Molten goes over a period of days called the Tzama Conference, Tzama Nafshi, both in terms of like almost a spiritual revival and book sale. It's a massive undertaking. But let's go back. I don't want to jump ahead. Let's talk about what was going on during this time period. If you remember, he's in Tsarist Russia. It's the 18th century, of course, and the Tsar and his peeps are very suspicious about any potential movement that could threaten the centralized control by the Tsar. Any secretive groups, any messianic fervor. Why would they think there'd be any messianic fervor? Again, here it comes rearing its ugly head once again. This is only less than 100 years after Shabtai Tzvi, Yaakov Frank, the birth of Chassidut, which some saw, like we saw the Vilna Gaon thought it was the beginning of another messianic movement. Any foreign influence, any involvement of Qatar in Israeli politics, oh, that's something else. Especially from territories that were under Ottoman or Austrian control. Evidently there was a tremendous hatred between Tsarist Russia and anyone under Ottoman, i.e. Turks, Turkish control, Austrian control. We also know that at this same time, the Maggid Mezrich has been passed, as the Baal Shem Tov passed the Maggid Mezrich. Maggid Mezrich passes along his teachings to all these new disciples, including the Alter Rebbe. And he, Reb Shneir Zalman, is starting to promulgate this with his teachings in the Sefer Tanya. He also authored another new volume called the Shulchan Aruch HaRav. If you're not familiar with that, there is, besides the Shulchan Aruch, which we talked about months ago, authored by Rabbi Yosef Karo, amended by Rabbi Moshe Isserlis for the Ashkenazi opinion. The Admor HaZaken, that's what they call him in Hebrew. Admor is Adonenu Morenu V'Rabbeinu. So the Admor HaZaken, the elder Admor, meaning the Baal HaTanya, also authored a Shulchan Aruch for Chabad Hasidim. It was mostly like the normative, regular, quote-unquote, Shulchan Aruch, but there are some Chabad Minhagim or opinion halacha that are different. So he wrote their own Shulchan Aruch, and you can find it in probably most shuls who have a decent library, especially in any Jewish libraries. So he's becoming more popular. His Hasidim are growing, and these red flags start going off in the Tsar's living room. Why was he arrested? So in approximately October of 1798, which approximates sometime a little bit after, like right after Sukkot, the Russian authorities arrest him and imprison him in the Peter and Paul Fortress in St. Petersburg. Now, can you imagine just what his neshama must have felt like? Forget that he's in prison. He's in prison in the Peter and Paul Fortress in St. Petersburg. Not a good look. And that particular prison was used for high-profile political prisoners. So already you understand that when he was imprisoned, it was already something that they saw as a political threat, and therefore they wanted to quash it. But what happened? How did they know about it? Okay, so fine, they hear some rumblings about this man, but evidently there were charges that were brought up against him. Number one was treason. Now, how would a Chabad rabbi who has Hasidim, how is it he's going to be a traitor to the Tsarist Russia? Why? He was charged with supporting the Ottoman Empire. How is he supporting the Ottoman Empire? Because first of all, they were the Russians' enemy. He was fundraising for doing fundraising activities, and he talked about specifically in Igeret HaKodesh also about raising funds for Jews living in Eretz Yisrael. At that time, it's under Ottoman rule. So if you're fundraising for Palestine, for Israel, for whatever it's being called the name of the week, it's not Ayala Kat Batalina, that's a long, long time ago, then you're supporting the Ottoman Empire. You're a traitor. That's one. Another possible reason, subversion. Enough was told to the Tsar through his spies. And by the way, that sounds so creepy, and spies. Just go back to the 70s, the 60s and the 70s, when most of us remember the whole time period of the Soviet Jewry and the Iron Curtain and spies. As soon as you applied for a visa to make Aliyah, then you lost your job. And if you taught Hebrew and you had to smuggle and fill, we all know the stories. So there's nothing new in Russia. There was nothing new. At that point, it's not Tsarist Russia in the 60s and 70s. But in any case, the subversion. What's the subversion that reaches the ears of the Tsar? This Hasidic movement is being seen and perceived as a secretive group. It has a charismatic leader. It has mass appeal, and it appears it's like a form of a revolutionary movement in the eyes of the Tsarist regime. Now, we do know, of course, eventually there is going to be a revolution, but that's not until 1917, if my years are right, where there'll be a revolution in Russia at the end of the Tsars and all that. But they saw this as a massive threat. There was also another, which is hard to, it's not hard to understand, especially when you take it into context of what we are seeing today in Israel and the different opinions of how things this country should run in terms of army and other things. Remember that there were people among our own fellow Jews, the Mitnagdim, who opposed Chassidut in general, that the Mitnagdim themselves helped to contribute to the arrest of this man, of the Admor Hazaken. Informants portrayed him as some subversive individual, cult-like figure, and that tzaddik. Now we talked about that last time. That Chassidut, the person who's like running the Chassidut, is known also as the Rebbe, is known as the tzaddik, was some kind of a seen as having supernatural authority, and it was a threat to the state's religious control. Package all that together, and the Alter Rebbe gets thrown in jail. Interestingly enough, he's in prison for X amount of days, which I'll tell you in a minute, which is a significant number. But during that time, he is interrogated constantly. During this intense interrogation, his brilliant mind, his clarity of speech, so impressed his interrogators that ultimately he was acquitted of all charges. How long is he imprisoned? 53 days. The significance? Tanya has 53 chapters. Is it a coincidence? Nothing when it came to you don't call him the first Lubavitcher Rebbe. He's the founder of Chabad Chassidut, but he was the Reb Shneir Zal Liadi. Nothing was coincidence with him at all. There is a modern day comparison that can be made. When Reb Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha, was in Russia, he too was arrested. I guess it's the thing you do. I guess maybe I should want to get arrested because this way it makes me even better a person. I don't know. He was arrested, and he wrote that when he stood in front of the person who was interrogating him, he couldn't move a muscle. He was so scared. He didn't move. And he said he learned a lesson from that. And if I'm not mistaken, that as a result, when he said, if I feel like that in front of Basar Vadam, in front of a human person, how do I not feel that in front of God? And if I'm not mistaken, he stood and it came especially to Shmona Esrei at rigid attention, because there's no, he shouldn't be this, none of the shuckling, none of the back and forth thing. I actually just recently was watching videos of him. I just don't remember. But it's something to be gained from that insight of someone like that. So what happens on the Liberation Day, Yotet Kislev, Yat Kislev? It was December 1st, 1798, right around the time of the French Revolution. It's the 19th of Kislev, and he's released. And I said before that it wasn't just that he was released that was so significant. Okay, that's not necessarily a reason to establish Rosh Hashanah Chassidut, and it's a Chag, and it's Chag HaGeula, and dressed in Shabbat clothing. This happened while Tanya is being written. It happened while Chassidut itself was under the microscope. When he was thrown in prison, his Chassidim saw this as a heavenly decree reflecting a negative judgment on Chassidut. I don't know if they meant it on specific Chabad Chassidut or Chassidut in general. Among Chassidic tradition, there is a concept, and it's not just among Chassidim, Malchut Shel Mata Keneged Malchut Shel Mala. What happens on earth reflects what's happening in heaven. So they felt that the fact that the Alter Rebbe was thrown in jail was a sign from heaven that's not a good thing what's happening. And maybe they're going down the wrong path. Not that they shouldn't be religious and not that they shouldn't learn Torah, but maybe that derech isn't the right path. So his imprisonment by some was interpreted as a quote prosecution against this dissemination of what they refer to as Pnimei Torah, the inner mystical insights into Torah. His release was the vindication that was saying, you know what? The fact that he was let out means that no, we are doing the right thing, and therefore this is like the springboard to move forward. So it's not just that he was let out. The fact was that it also was a vindication of what they were afraid of for about a month and a half, I guess. Almost 2 months. That their Chassidut in general was coming under the microscope and was not being completely accepted in the heavens. And now they saw that it was time to move forward. So after his release, Rosh Zalman intensifies his efforts to teach and spread Chassidut. He too saw it as a siman min hashamayim. He decided to make the teachings more accessible, the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov more accessible, and to make it more systematic, make it more intellectually robust, make it more challenging. And he develops this entire full Chabad Chassidut of Chochmah, Bina, Dat, with the goal of the best possible path to service of Hashem. What happens on the 19th of Kislev? What do they do? They have something that some of you may not have heard of called a Farbrengen. A Farbrengen is a Hasidic gathering. It's often late into night. It's a lot of singing, storytelling, Torah insights, maybe a little vodka, maybe a lot of vodka. Ma'amarim, we talked last week about what they call Chassidut Maimer. A Maimer is a discourse, a Hasidic discourse. They'll spend time on specific ones. There are, within Chabad world, there are certain mamarim of the not present day, but the last Chabad Rabbi, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, Zecher Tzadik Kodesh Livracha, specific ones they refer to by the title of the ma'amar or a specific date it was given, and that becomes like extremely important in the Chabad world. There are special formal invitations sent out for the various Farbrengens. Some people fast on the 18th. I honestly don't know people who do this, but I understand there are some who fast on the 18th in preparation for the redemption of the 19th. And of course, special emphasis on learning Tanya and Chassidut on that day. And again, like I say, 53 days, 53 chapters. There are other reasons. If you learn Tanya, you'll understand, you'll find out why. But like I say, the liberation of Reb Shneor Zalman of Liadi from jail was much, much more and much greater than personal salvation. It became basically a turning point, not just for Chassidut Chabad, but for Chassidut in general. It allowed Chabad to flourish, and therefore allowed others to grow as well. And what Chabad sees, now many people conflate and believe that the only goal of Chabad is to have Mashiach. And that's not accurate at all. It's a definite important building block because of something that happens along with Mashiach and what it means. Again, you have to learn Tanya to understand. Tonight's not the place for that. Having said that, as I mentioned in my WhatsApp message this morning, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, and that's modern day Chabad. So let me start off with a couple of comments, and then we'll talk a little bit of tachlis.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Why was Seichel or Haskalah not included? Chachma, Bia, Dina.
Chachma, Bina, and Dat.
Right. Seichel to me is more important than all of them, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. So the answer, the short answer is you really have to learn Tanya to understand what does it really mean. What does Da'at mean? It does not just mean knowledge, because all three of those words have a very similar meaning. Chachma's wisdom, Bina's intellect, and Da'at is knowledge. But when you in the world of Chabad, the world of Tanya, it includes what you're talking about, without a doubt. And there's reasons why specifically those words and those phrases, topics are used. So yeah, and by the way, you also notice that in Nusach Ashkenaz, as opposed to the other Sfarad and Adot Mizrach and others, it doesn't mention Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat in Tachonein Ladam Da'at, but the others all do. So why? That's a different topic. But you're right. It's an important point, because you can have all this stuff, but if you don't have common sense and seichel, like what's all that worth? So again, Yeah, he doesn't negate it at all. If you learn it, you'll see how that really works in. But it's a great question. The controversy, which we have to talk about, um, has to have a preamble. The preamble is something I mentioned last week. I believe that Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the last rabbi of Chabad, who passed away in 1994, I remember vividly the day he died, did more for Judaism around the world than anybody else since Moshe Rabbeinu. How can I make such a statement? The Rambam, he wrote, the Rabbi Yosef Karo, what he wrote, the Vilna Gaon, what he taught, the Rav Hai Gaon, and tremendous masters of Torah, tremendous. We can't understand Chumash without Rashi. It's virtually impossible. But what did Chabad, what did the Rebbe do? He made Torah, not just Torah, but Judaism accessible almost everywhere in the world. There's a very big difference between having, I can pick up a Chumash in Anchorage, Alaska, and in Phuket, and I can pick up one in somewhere in China, in the Ural Mountains, versus I have a place where I can go and I can get food and someone can teach me a little Torah. It's an oasis. The Rebbe set up oases around the world. No one can take that away from him. No one can ever say that that is not an unbelievable accomplishment. And that's my personal belief. I am not a Chabad Chassid by any stretch of the imagination. I am what they call Chavakuk. Chavakuk means you take something from Chabad, Breslov, and Rav Kook. And even more than that. I mean, I'll learn. I'll take Torah from anybody. I'll take Torah from the Satmar Rebbe, even though I do not obviously agree with a lot of his philosophical approaches, especially to what we talk about modern day Medina Yisrael. But Torah is Torah. But as far as the getting access to Judaism, no one did it better than Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson Zatzal. So that we have to get that out of the way. The very polarizing event. By the way, the day that he died, there were concerns that in Crown Heights, which is basically the world headquarters of Chabad, that there would be mass suicides. Thank God that did not happen. Hashem. The most visible phenomenon of contemporary Jewish life was Menachem Mendel Schneerson, because his existence touched on messianism, not him per se, we're coming back to that, leadership, halachic boundaries, the role of Chassidut in the world. He was just this massive figure. Who was he? He was born in 1902 and he died in 1994. And from 1951 until his death in 1994, so for 43 years, he was the Rebbe. Like you talk about the Rav in the United States means Rav Soloveitchik. You talk about the Rebbe. Here is called the Rabbi. You talk about Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. He, again, founded this global Jewish outreach empire. There's no smaller word than that. His absolute empire. What starts to happen in the 80s is that many of his Hasidim see the Rebbe as the potential Mashiach. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. They saw him as the potential Mashiach. And the Rebbe himself never really completely denied the claim. He didn't encourage it. He didn't discourage it. Yes, there are videos of when they're seeing him, we want Mashiach now and going like this. I've watched many videos of his Farbrengen, his talks, just to look at him, to look at his eyes. It's absolutely mesmerizing. I could see how a person could be completely taken by his passion. They started to chant, long live our master, teacher, and rabbi, king, Messiah, forever and ever. Now, if you remember, we talked about Shabtai Tzvi. This is very similar to what was being said about Shabtai Tzvi and to Shabtai Tzvi, that he was the Melech HaMashiach, and there were books, the book plates made for books that already, because printing is already about 100 years old by his time, a little bit more, and with a picture of him sitting on a throne with crowns. And during his lifetime, especially after his stroke in 1992, there's a lot of this Yechi Adonenu, Morenu V'Rabbeinu. This messianic fervor is intensifying. The Rebbe passed away in June of 94. Our two-door down neighbor was real Chabad Hasidim, and that Shabbat that was going to be coming up was going to be one of their son's bar mitzvahs. So I remember going over to the house to bring a gift, and they're literally like they just lost their best friend and relative. And that's how I found out that the Rebbe had passed away. He died with no surviving children and no successor, which left an unprecedented vacuum, specifically in the world of Chabad. There are other dynasties of various other Chassidut that it didn't not happen, but in Chabad it had not happened from the time of the Reb Shneir Zalman until 1994. So the belief that he is Mashiach, will be Mashiach, it didn't fade. What it did do was to splinter Chabad. Now, nowadays, it is not as severe as back then, but I will tell you there basically were 1, 2, 3, 4 groups. I'm going to try and mention this kind of briefly. I'm going to come back to it next time. They're the moderate Mashiachistim. A Mashiachist is a person who believes the Rebbe was Mashiach and is somehow going to return. They cite the Rambam about the view that Mashiach is possibly someone who could come from the dead, and that the day of Gimel Tammuz, which is when he died, is called the Yom HaGadol v'Hanorah, a day of concealment but not true death. They point to the statement that Yaakov Avinu never died, which is not meant literally. There's the extreme Mashiachistim that's the moderate Mashiachistim that believe that he still could come back. The extreme Mashiachistim is that he is physically still alive and he will reveal himself. And the idea of putting yechi on things and putting on their kippot, they will never say, like I said before, Zatzal, Zecher Tzadik v'Kadosh Livracha. They will never say he was niftar, he died. Some people refer to 770 Eastern Parkway in New York, the headquarters, as the Beit HaMikdash Me'at. And then you have this tiny, tiny, mentally ill fringe group called Elohistim or Elokistim. What does that mean? That somehow Rebbe is divine, chas v'shalom, that he's God. He's the physical embodiment of God. It's a heretical, very, very out of the pale, non-Jewish approach. There was one shul, I will not say what city, but I will tell you it was not Chicago. And his picture hung in the shul, in the front of the shul, and underneath they wrote God. Now that is absolute apikorsis. It is antithetical to Judaism, and it's horrific. Now, there's somewhere in the middle for many, many, what they call mainstreamers, anti-Mashiachistim. Could he have been Mashiach? He could have been Mashiach. But he's not. He's not here. We need to bring his teachings. There's an old joke that says that there are 2 types of Chabad Hasidim: those who say that he's Mashiach, and those who won't admit that won't admit it publicly he's Mashiach. I don't believe that, but I do know that most Chabad people I know do still believe that he is Mashiach, and somehow will. I hope they're right. I don't care. We need Mashiach more than ever. There are some things that are done. I would just add another couple minutes here. Some flashpoints of controversy still. There are many Chabad shuls or Beit Chabad that will add yechi at the end of davening. Sometimes they'll even blow a shofar before that. It's led to, unfortunately, some split minyanim and some, unfortunately, even physical altercations. Some Jewish communities are a little reticent to bring Chabad shluchim, messengers into their community if they're openly Mashiachist. There have been issues with Chabad coming into a community and eventually trying to wrest to wrest away property and take it over and make it property of Chabad. But there's one thing that I think that we have to acknowledge that's very important. When a couple goes on shlichut, when they go as emissaries of the Rebbe, wherever they go in the world, for the most part, the first, I don't know if it's a year or 2 years, Chabad helps to fund the Chabad house, it helps to fund projects. After that, that's it. The emissaries are on their own to raise funds. So if you find yourself somewhere in Timbuktu and you find yourself going to Chabad house, always give money to them. Always help them out because they're doing something that 99% of our fellow Jews would never do. That's to uproot their lives and to help fellow Jews anywhere in the world. And that's all because of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson Zatzal. With the controversy, without the controversy, we have to understand where this all started from. It goes all the way back to the 1700s with Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi and the founding of Chabad Chassidut. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Next week, I think we're off. I think, just a minute, let me double check. I think there's something going on. Let's see, Tuesday. Yeah, I might have to cancel next week. Right now, it's still open. I'll let you know, of course, before class. But I'm glad everyone was able to be here tonight. Bezrat Hashem, we'll see you either next week or the week after or 2 days from yesterday or not. I don't know, whatever it is. Have a good evening and a good day, everybody. Be well. Good to see y'all.